Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a second. If you could please find your seats again. We will have another break opportunity after this presentation also. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Wang and Dr. Hong to the podium for their presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here today, listening to the great talk by our colleagues in the same space and seeing a lot of familiar faces. My name is Bing Wang. I'm a research scientist at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Joining me today also is another colleague of mine called Wanshi Hong. We are working together on this heavy load project, so we are really excited here today to talk about this project and the preliminary results that we have generated. As the name suggests, heavy load is short for medium and heavy duty electric vehicle infrastructure, load operations and deployment. The overarching goal for this tool, originally funded by California Energy Commission, is to project the charging infrastructure needs for the medium and heavy-duty vehicles. We will talk more in detail about the technical capabilities and the solution architectures. So with this, here's our outline for today's discussion. Before we start, I really appreciate the invitation from Hannah and Kayla for having us here. As you can see that a couple of elements, we will start with a high-level overview of heavy load, the background, motivation, technical approaches, and the overarching goal. Following that, we'll talk about the current modeling architecture, most important, the assumptions. We'll try to cover all of the elements here, but unfortunately, as I, by some mistake, we didn't compile the DRAGE study case into the slide deck, but hopefully in the future we'll have more opportunity to share that. And then we'll talk about the limitations, challenges, and the future works that we will, where we can identify opportunities to work together. So first, the motivation. As we know, transportation sector generates the most greenhouse gas emissions, both for the country but also for the state of California. According to some statistics in 2020, medium and heavy-duty vehicles are actually significant market segments that generates the greenhouse gas emissions much larger than we thought. For instance, MDHD vehicles represent only like 6% of the overall vehicle population. However, they contribute to more than 23% of fuel consumption, more than 26% of the greenhouse gas emission. So California, as a result, is really aggressive in setting the decarbonization goals for these market segments. A number of scenarios coming out of government agencies regulate different ZEV emission vehicle penetration into the future. For instance, here the ACT rule by California Air Resource Board regulates that the trucks sold in California to be zero emission starting 2024. If this is successful, we will have full transition in 2045. Under this initiative, CEC, calls for project, charging infrastructure needs for decarbonizing the medium heavy-duty vehicles, and LBL is contracted to develop the heavy load tool to answer a number of a series of questions related to the charging infrastructures. For instance, how many chargers does a state need? How many chargers does each county need? What type of chargers are needed? What are the best locations to put those chargers on the map so that both the drivers and the fleet operators can minimize their impact. If we take one step further, even more complex questions we can ask is that if for a particular location, if 50% of the drivers are willing to be controlled in some smart charging fashion, what will be the new load shape look like? And what's the infrastructure needs in that scenario? And more and more complex questions like that, into the future, we are not very comfortable to answer at this time. So we are trying to develop this tool to help stakeholders, legislators, government planners to test drive the futuristic scenarios and answer a series of what-if problems. So this is overall statement of the motivation. To be clear that heavy load tool is only projecting infrastructure needs for vehicles above 10,000 pounds, which is the key difference than other tools we may be heard of in the DOE spaces. So this is a high-level architecture of the software tool we have been developing in the past 2 years. Without going into too much details here, I just want to highlight that in general, we have two kinds of approaches. The first approach called top-down approach, where we take the aggregated information from other tools developed by CA agencies. For instance, the MFAC, vehicle populations, emission profile, activity profiles from MFAC tools, and also a number of adoption scenarios from different agencies. And then we disaggregate this information into a number of virtual trips. For instance, you see the start time of a trip, stop time of a trip, and start time of the next trip. And we develop some algorithms to determine how much energy is needed for this vehicle to get filled before the next trip, so that their business dynamics, duty cycles will not be impacted. As we gradually evolving into the next phase of the project, now we slowly transition this part, the top-down decision part, into a bottom-up agent-based simulation. Is indeed to answer the what-if scenarios in the future. If we have a population of electrified medium heavy-duty fleets, how they are going to behave in the transportation system. This is exactly the tool we developed to review that. So the agent-based simulator will keep track of the chain of behaviors for the vehicles. For instance, when they hit the road, when the trip starts, which route this vehicle is taking, and if the vehicle has enough energy in the battery to finish the whole trip, then it's okay for the vehicle to charge at the depot, either before the trip or after the trip when it returns to bases. However, for public infrastructures, the question is, if the vehicle does not have enough energy to cover the trip, and in the middle of the trip, which station should the vehicle select, as a waypoint to get some more energy, so the driver can be confident to finish the whole trip. So this how we determine the charging infrastructures for depots and also for public opportunistic charging locations. After that, there are a number of metrics considered so far in heavy load, depending on the location of the infrastructure deployment site, if it's a rural area, if it's in the urban area, or if it's alongside the freight corridors. And also the accessibility type, depending on if it's public accessible by all the fleet operators, so the vehicles can stop by and quickly get refilled some energy. We consider a range of power levels, starting from level 2, 20 kilowatt charging, according to some survey and conversations with fleet operators. Actually, a lot of lower power, chargers are needed for the medium heavy-duty vehicles behind the fence. And we also consider chargers beyond 350 kilowatt. For instance, the megawatt level superchargers or extreme fast chargers along the public locations for the fleet trucks. They can stop by and quickly get refueling in that case. Different infrastructure types have been considered, which probably in Wensh's presentation she will review the results about that. To deep dive into the bottom-up simulation, here we show a visualization of selected the case study. You can see the truck route, truck network in the background, and also a bunch of blue dots as the candidate infrastructure deployment locations. These locations are based on the California statewide truck parking studies, including the rest areas, public truck stops, maintenance centers, where we assume the infrastructure deployment can be easily starting from that locations. And the moving red dots are the vehicles being simulated. You can see when the trip starts, where the trip starts, and the origin and destination. We'll explain later how the decision logic looks like. But here, just wanna showcase that this is a high-level approach. We are developing this tool to review the futuristic scenarios. A couple of advantages of this approach, as you can tell, a lot of candidate locations can be included. In addition to the California statewide truck parking study, we now are trying to include more land use data and availabilities. Some land use parcels that are not available right now, but have great potential in the future to deploy some infrastructure. And also you can see, a lot of vehicle population can be simulated, and all the assumptions about vehicle behaviors are quite transparent. We want to leave all the knobs, transparent and explicit, so legislators or planners in the future can turn one of them or maybe a couple of them to see what the impact the result have. To enable the simulation, we need the road network. This work actually has been extended to the entire nation, funded by the Bi-Infrastructure Partisan Law. And we are working on the nationwide freight corridor. And the second important element is the travel demand. That basically specify how many trips from one location on the map as trip origins to other locations on the map as trip destinations. This travel demand also has the start time statistics and payload info, etc. And we are working with the Cambridge Systematic, the company who developed the California statewide travel demand model, to refine this model for future. So instead of individual trips, we will actually have a tour for the vehicle for a couple of days. starting from the depot to one location, then the next, then return to the depot. So this will give us better visibility to determine when's the best time for the vehicle to charge. Then another advantage of agent-based simulation is that each agent aka each vehicle in the case is that has its own decision-making logic. We want to make it as realistic as possible for the future. So far we assume that when the vehicle starts, and if the energy in the battery cannot cover the full trip, and the driver will reinitiate the routing access. The routing process, which I'll explain later in graphics, that will determine the intermediate locations as a waypoint for this vehicle to stop by. That's how we determine which location will be used and how many infrastructure will be needed for that location. So you can see the granularity is really high and can be at the location level. And later on in Wanshi's presentation, she actually aggregated the results into the traffic analysis zones. In California, we have 5,500-ish traffic analysis zones, and we can also aggregate to county level or the state level. So it's really flexible for us to cross validate or compare notes with other collaborators in this space. And next question you may ask is, how realistic can this trips be? We are using some real-world GPS location data donated by our partners, UC Riverside and West Virginia University, who used to be funded by CEC. And we use the behavior patterns extracted from the real-world database to calibrate the travel demand model, when the trip will start, how long is the trip usually be, and what's the parking duration, etc. Basically, there are more than 1 million trips in the travel demand model as input to heavy load for the 2030 scenario, but we are cross-validating this result with a number of scenarios. For instance, the AATE3 adoption scenario by CEC, SS and the ACT-ACF scenarios by CARB. So it's another advantage that we can use the agent-based simulation to represent the future adoption scenarios. It's more a detailed explanation how the charger selection, charger choice model works. In the middle of the trip, the vehicle will find the optimal location as a waypoint to finish, to refuel the energy into the battery so that he can finish the whole trips. And this algorithm will consider all the available locations as candidate, and the one gives the shortest overall distance will be selected, and the ones with the most charging requests at the location shows some popularity among the truck drivers. As you can tell, in this particular study, the radius of the red circle is proportional to the number of charging requests received at that location. And you can see, hopefully this can make it easier for the legislators or planners to prioritize locations. After the integration with the land use data, it could be more realistic in the future by broadening the site candidates. So the next part is how we are gonna take the simulated results into the grid impact analysis space. So in this section, we worked on ICA load map database from the utilities so we can analyze the historical higher bound of the load on that particular circuit, and also the lower bound of loads on that circuit. Um, um, that's what you can see as red violin plots versus green violin plots, and based on the simulated results and load at a particular location, we can add the EV load on top of the base load to see what the new load looks like in the future. And interestingly, each circuit, they will be served by feeders, transformers, upstream grid components, which have certain limits, so that this so-called hosting capacity analysis will help us determine if this circuit needs upgrade in the future in order to support the simulated even EV charging load. And here are some examples in the previous case studies where we add the simulated MDHD EV charging load on top of the lower bound of the circuit base load. That's why we call it optimistic, assuming the circuit base load is operating at the minimal level. But of course, it can be operating at the maximal level, which will, make it more easily to break the circuit capacity. Hopefully, in the future, we can work with utility more tightly on this study to validate all the circuits in California, and that's gonna, help them, plan further with the infrastructure upgrade needs. With this, I will stop here, and my colleague Wanshu will take over to talk about some preliminary results recently.
Thank you, Bing. So I'm Wanshu Hong from LBL, and I'll be introducing our recent preliminary results from the bot agent-based simulations. So I'll be mostly covering 4 types of simulation scenarios. The first one is the baseline scenario, where we assume all the future EVs are charging based on their natural behavior. And the rest 3 scenarios are with some managed charging to avoid some peak load during the energy peak hours. So the baseline scenario, where we assume the EVs to be charging at like natural behavior. For example, they will only charge when the vehicle is not on a job or it is currently idle, and they will use the public charger if it's on the current trip and it doesn't have enough energy to finish the current trip. So this is for the baseline scenario. And for the load, then we define 3 other scenarios to potentially control, to try to control the energy demand and potentially reduce the peak load. So the first one is called the load shifting, where we want to shift the charging load from the peak energy usage hours. For this case, we are assuming from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. So in this time of the day, if the EVs are planning to charge, then it's more likely to charge in the later time of the day, or they will plan to charge during the daytime. And the second controlled method is called a managed charging rate, where we assume that for each vehicle, if it's charging at different time of the day, then the charging rate could be different. So for example, during the midnight and the afternoon period, they would have higher charging. They can use a higher charging rate, but like during the peak, during the nighttime or the morning time, they will have a lower charging rate. And finally, we have a smart charging scenario, where we assume to optimize each vehicle's charging behavior, where we consider that this vehicle will have some flexibilities in their parking hours, and we use this as a decision as a flexibility to the charging, and with the objective to reduce the energy peak load for the current circuit, as well as reduce the energy price for this particular driver who is charging, so that, for example, this driver will have some time to, if they can park for several hours, then they can tend to wait a few like half an hour or so to wait for a lower energy price, or at the same time potentially reduce the current circuit peak load. So here we have some preliminary results on the charging load profile. These results are generated for entire California states for the 4 scenarios. So where we can see that for the baseline scenario, they will have a higher charging demand during the peak energy hours, whereas the rest 3 methods will tend to shift these nighttime chargings to some other time of the day. And these are like 100% of vehicles are using this current method. And in the future scenarios, we can assume to be the vehicles, different percentage of the vehicles can use different methods and potentially form a more like combined type of charging profile. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the next slide here, we give an estimation on the charger quantities, where we project the charging infrastructure needs by regions based on this CSTDM trip data, where we can see here from the left-hand side figure, the overall charger infrastructure needs will continue to increase from the year 2025 to year 2035. For example, for the depot chargers, it will increase by approximately 10 times approximately 10 times from like 25K to 250K. And the right-hand side figure here shows the distribution of geospatial distribution for the public chargers and depot chargers based on a county level. And we are also be able to use our bottom-up simulation to generate traffic analysis zone level of results. But here for better visualization, the results are showing in county levels. And we also have some charging demand results from the geospatial point of view. The left-hand side figure here shows the overall charging demand by county, where the lighter part means that there's higher charging demand at the specific locations. And the right-hand side figure here shows the public charging demand by the candidate charging lots, candidate parking lots that Bing have just introduced. Here we can see that the radius of each circles are proportional to the charging demand at this location, and the different color of the circle means that shows the percentage of loading comparing to this current circuit's maximum load capacities. For example, the green dots means that the current EV load are pretty much like at most 50% of the current circuit load capacity, where the yellow dots means that like at this point and at this time of the day, the current charging load is approximately like less than 100%, but more than 50% for the current load capacity. And if it's a red dot, this means that the current circuit capacity could be like not good enough for this location to have this amount of chargers, and this could potentially lead to investigations for the utility companies on potential circuit upgrades. So, and we are currently still collecting those points where we have a gray dots for the circuit capacity data. And with that, this concludes my results introduction, and I would like Bing to give a discussion and conclusion.
Thank you, Wenshi. The last part of our presentation is the challenges we met so far. The first part is the data. As our Army colleague has introduced, if you have better data to represent the reality, you can be more certain about the scenarios you are simulating. However, to my best knowledge, it is challenging for any single data provider, GPS data provider, to claim they have more than 50% coverage for the entire truck volume in the country. So we are basically doing our work based on partial visibility of reality, right? But more data definitely will help us calibrate the behavioral models more accurately. And there has been a long discussion even in the DOE space, right? If you use the GPS location data to explain the current situation, then the first question is how much coverage that be? 3%, 5%, 50%? And how can that be, be the actual truck activities in the future? And second is that, if we take that as a reality in the future, how can we scale up and scale down based on different scenarios which are needed by government planning agencies, right? Given different scenarios, the population are quite different. How can we scale up? How can we scale down, and make it more confident as future scenario? So if you have any data that you want us to consider in this model, and we are happy to take it and help you, analyze and sharing results to discuss, the potential impacts. And also a lot of models, parameters assumed. For instance, the power levels, charging power levels for light-duty trucks, charging powers for the Class 8 heavy-duty trucks are based on assumption. These assumptions need to be validated by real-world stakeholders, fleet operators. We have already numerous conversations with them, but the more the merrier here to help us get closer to the reality. And for the future work, we are trying to validate the scenario with more stakeholders and sister agencies, and try to define those scenarios that can generate meaningful results in the future. And we are also incorporating hydrogen refueling infrastructure planning work in the next phase by working with other collaborators in the space. And the results are being validated by sister agencies. So hopefully, please stay tuned. Hopefully, in the future, more results will come out of this study. Wanna appreciate again Hannah and Kayla for having us, and special thanks for CEC for supporting us. Without them, we won't have any opportunity doing this exciting work on this exciting and urgent topic. Well, thanks a lot.
Are we taking questions, Hannah? Until 3.
Or at least that's our goal.
If you do have a question, okay. Yes, okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, this is Nick Chappie with the California Trucking Association. This question is for you, Dr. Wang. You had mentioned that the data was based off of, or at least a portion of it was based off of the California Transportation Commission's, or the California's truck park studies. Did you guys factor in the lack of truck parking spaces that would be needed to have every truck in a spot? Did you include that within the analysis?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a great question. The short answer is no. We haven't included any additional spaces into the study. The current CSTPS data has roughly 400-ish locations across the state. But when talking to the developers and other stakeholders, truck parking limitation is definitely a serious issue in this country, and people are looking for, just want to clarify that those locations, most of them are, public, and they are private, with charge locations. We don't have much visibility, so may not have been included. In the future, we will try to acquire that part of data. And also, the land use data set we are looking at, trying to bring more candidate locations onto the table. Those land site parcels, land use parcels have met the criteria, but no development yet, but with great potential to be an infrastructure site, we'll also incorporate them in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you for the presentation. Akiko Yamagami from LA Metro again. So I missed what AATE3 stands for, so I would like you to spell that out. That's one. And then my bigger question is the slide that has the title Circuit Capacity Analysis at the site level. Do you mind walking me through that? And because I think there's a lot of information in there and perhaps great insights, but I can really multitask listening to you and trying to understand the graphs. So yeah, this one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. For the first one, forgive my ignorance. I actually don't know what AAT3 stands for, but
I can.
Maggie over there, please.
Hi, thank you. This is Maggie Den. I am a transportation demand forecaster with California Energy Commission, so I can answer this question. AATE3 stands for Additional Achievable Transportation Electrification Scenario 3. That's a new scenario that we've included in our IPER 2022 report. That's the Integrated Energy Policy Report. To give a little bit more, AATE3 is taking our baseline scenario inputs and assumptions, but using the CARB ACF forecasted stock ZEV percentages, but still maintaining our baseline inputs and assumptions. Thank you. Thanks for letting me answer.
Thank you, Maggie. For the second question, yeah, thanks. I need to do more explanation here. For instance, the green line here is the lower bound of the historical circuit load, and the red one is the historical maximal bound of circuit load. And we simulated the EV charging load on top of the green one, assuming the circuit load is operating at minimal level. However, you can see even with minimal base load on the circuit, there's still some violations. By violation, I mean the new load exceeds the historical maximal load on that circuit. That means this circuit will see a new load that has not been seen in history. So hopefully that raised some red flag for utility companies saying, hey, we have a new situation here. Probably we need to do something different. Additional thought for LA Metro, I don't know if you guys operate under LA DWP or SCE, or both. Yeah, right. So I heard that with LA DWP, that maybe we have limited data for that area.
Bill Elrick, Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. I'm pleased to see you're going to do similar analysis. I'm right here for the hydrogen side, and I'm curious. I think the assumption was that you did with this study was all battery, like all the vehicles are batteries. You're going to take the same approach for hydrogen, and then maybe a similar question is then take a look at what those two results give you to figure out a little bit more insight into what might be optimization kind of across technologies.
Thanks. This is a great question. Well, first thing that occurred to me is the split ratio. Among all the scenarios between battery electric versus hydrogen, we need more work to summarize existing assumptions in this space about the future. That will give different truck volumes with hydrogen fuel cell powertrain versus battery electric powertrain on road into the future. And secondly, the assumptions for two type of infrastructure are quite different, honestly. For this regard, we are working with UC Davis and Unreal team, who, both of them who have developed the tools and, to estimate the parameters not only on the vehicle side but also on the infrastructure side. We want to take that into consideration to see what are the best locations for fuel cell versus battery electric. And actually, one more difference is hydrogen. Station infrastructure requires a complete different set of energy supply network. So that's another dimension of complexity that we will take into consideration.
Can I just ask for clarification there? What I think I heard you say is you're going to not do 100% hydrogen analysis like you've done here. You're going to try to figure out your split ahead of time and then do the analysis?
Yeah, so far the adoption scenarios just give us overall ZEV population into the future. We need to work ourselves out about the split ratio, hydrogen versus battery electric.
I will just offer an unrequested suggestion. I think you want to look at complete transition separate, because you're right, they're absolutely very different, but look at 100% hydrogen scenario and see, to even this slide, some of the impacts of that. Look at the same for hydrogen and then go back and look at the reasons and impacts of how that split might go. Because otherwise you're going to predetermine your outputs, well before you really understand the bigger picture.
Yep, that's a solid suggestion. Thanks. Who had a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. So in this case, I'm assuming the graphs on the upper side is San Diego, maybe is the GE, and then the lower half is PG&E, and then looks like over time between 2025 to 2040, like San Diego would be doing relatively okay with respect to their energy capacity, but then they'll be in trouble in 2040. Is that how I'm going to interpret it?
No. Thanks for the question, by the way. This is just a case,
Right.
particular case for this particular location.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're just showing it here as an example. Our analysis can be done to a particular location with a particular circuit. It doesn't represent the overall load in their territory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then, in later slide, you had the charging demand results preliminary, where you were showing, whether that site will exceed the charging capacity with the circles. Is this kind of like the results of what you did in, at the site level?
Yeah. So the previous slides are like, if we extract one of these points, what is the circuit capacity looks like? And this one is like granular. If we show the entire California, what will be the kind of like the locations have like some circuit capacity problem.
So then, in this like animated circles, is that showing like how? Is it also like a time series? Is it showing the change between 2025 and 2040?
Oh no, this animation is for one day simulation. So like at different hour, what is the load capacity looks like for this?
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. And then I also want to agree with the hydrogen guy's suggestion that we're not like at LA Metro, we haven't decided on like it's gonna be like battery electric only. We're also like fully open to hydrogen as well. And if statewide you are doing this analysis to see like, what the energy demand might be, whether it's electric or hydrogen. I totally support that idea because ultimately I would like to reap the benefit of your analysis for LA County. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We would love to do that too, and we will be really happy to incorporate your practical opinions into our study as you guys work in the front
Great,
of
thank
this
you.
work.
Yeah.
Feel free to connect with us after the meeting. We will, definitely, work something together in
Great.
this space. And also, I want to clarify about the circuit capacity analysis. That, as you can tell, a lot of dots are gray, meaning that we don't have the good data from the ICA load map database. We are still working with utility through a tool called Edge, developed by Michael Wolford at CEC. Hopefully in the near future, we can get more solid answer and much better data for the results.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Dr. Wang. Heidi Sickler with BP Pulse Fleet. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, and actually you preempted my question. It was going to be about the EDGE tool, just trying to get a better sense of what the utilities role has been in this analysis process, and specifically whether the CEC and the CPUC have any sort of regulatory levers that they can use to direct utilities to help you validate the circuit capacity that's needed to build out the distribution system. We work very closely with ports on energy management. And what we're finding is that they have insufficient capacity right now for medium and heavy duty charging, and specifically for en-route charging. Some of our potential customers are saying like, there's no power out there. So, when I hear you saying that LADWP that data is not available, like that's troubling to hear. So just from a stakeholder perspective, what can we do to convey this message to regulators and the CC that, we need to get LADWP at the table to work with you on these issues?
Thanks. It's a $1 million problem. I actually don't know exact answer how we should make all the data accessible. But from my perspective, that CEC has done great work, to work with CPUC and developing this Edge tool where we can use as a proxy to access the circuit data. Obviously, some of the data is still missing, and for us as a researcher, we were happy to initiate collaboration or partnership through the project like this, or private sector driven demonstration project where we can get the first-hand infrastructure data. So every little piece will be helpful, and we will be happy to merge different pieces together as a whole picture to get better visibility of the circuit capacity. And we are reaching out to utilities in parallel for conversations, and hopefully we can have some leverage there to get more data. I don't know if this answers your question, but thanks for the question.
Also, if you don't mind if I just follow up on that too. I think the answer to that also lies in the process that the CPUC is working on, because the CEC and the CPUC are just now working on incorporating the estimated energy demand related to this shift to zero emissions into their forecasts. And they will be working with utilities, especially the investor-owned utilities, but we're collaborating with a lot of different kinds of utilities to further identify what the grid looks like in different places and how we can proactively plan to try to support the station needs. And I think that they're waiting for some of our work to get a little further along, and then they're hoping to incorporate that into their work with the utilities. So I think we will get there, but it's going to be a process that takes some time. and we're all working as quickly as we can. But we're starting to think about locations, as you're seeing here today. And I think that the CPUC especially will kind of bring that along and work with the CEC to try to narrow that down to more specific options. And then they can work with the utilities to look at the grid. So I think we will get there, but it's just going to be a long process.
Thank you for the talk. I've got a quick question. You mentioned you were using that GPS data to calibrate or look at your drive times and other things. Are you also using it for routing for the trucks?
No, short answer. We just calibrate the trip statistics, like start time, distance, duration between consecutive trips. And the routing, actually, we are assuming that, for the baseline scenario, that trucks will take the shortest distance route for their operation. Of course, it's an assumption. We can also do the shortest travel time routes, or in the future, shortest, the minimal energy routes. But so far, no.
Yeah. I think you need to cut it off. Okay. Yeah. Have you been able to compare that then? Kind of what your model says versus kind of what the GPS data tells you on those routings?
Not yet. We just initially did some validation using the origin and destination from the GPS to generate some routes from the router and compare in general if they agree with each other. And so far, for the limited case we validate, it works fine. But for the larger case, it's something we need to explore in the future.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a short break, and we'll come back at, what time should we come back, Kayla? At 3:15. Thank you.
A little bit sweating.
But it would be really interesting, yeah, because that.